Hello and welcome. This is The Green Room by Deloitte, a podcast where we ask the tricky questions about the world around us. I'm Lizzie Elston and you're listening to episode 8, where we ask, does the high street have a future? So thanks so much for joining us today for our next episode of The Green Room by Deloitte, where we're going to look at whether the high street has a future. Big day for me today, filling in for George, who's on paternity leave. Congratulations, George. He's had a little girl, so really sending out our best wishes to you and your family. And delighted to be joined by Dara, who we've not worked together yet, have we? So
no, this
nice
is my first time actually being in the same room as you, so that's
Excellent.
quite cool.
Wow.
But we're mixing it up in the green room, so that's nice.
And we've got some great guests today, so over to you to introduce them.
Cool. So today we have Colin Jeffrey. Colin leads the retail consulting team at Deloitte in the UK. With over 20 years' experience in the industry, he specialises in helping retail companies respond to rapidly changing consumer behaviour. Welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
We also have Matt Ward. Matt is a principal consultant at Market Gravity. His team launched The Walk, which is quite a snazzy sounding concept, which is an immersive retail technology experience based in Leeds. Welcome to you also.
Good morning.
And Colin and Matt, if you thought you could get away without doing the icebreaker challenge, you're very much mistaken. Everyone has to have a question. So Dara, do you want to get the icebreaker going?
Let's dive in. Let's see what we have today. Okay. Oh, this is quite a nice one. If there's one person you'd be starstruck to meet, who would it be? So maybe let's start with you, Matt.
Oh, good heavens. Well, I'm really shallow, so I think right now it would have to be the captain of my football team, who's a young lad called Jack Grealish. But It's not particularly erudite, I'm afraid. But yeah, that would be me.
What about you, Colin?
I wish I'd met Steve Jobs. I've read so much about him, and I think he's an amazing guy that would be very interesting to meet.
You, Lizzie?
Fascinating. I don't know, George Clooney? That's the first name that comes to mind, actually.
I think I'll go for his wife, Amal Clooney, because she's just doing some really cool things at the moment. I think she's just been appointed like the ambassador for press freedom. And so given that I'm interested in media and what that looks like with human rights and all that type of thing, I think it'd be quite cool to speak to her. So, yeah.
You distract Amal and I'll have a chat with George.
Okay, we're on
Well,
it.
you've got both ends of the spectrum now, haven't you? Let's be honest,
So let's get back to this week's question. Does the high street have a future? Obviously, can't miss the fact that there's been all sorts of problems over the last few years. Tough time in retail, store closures, business failures, job losses. But is it all the doom and gloom that we're hearing? Does the high street actually have a future? Is it evolving? What are your thoughts? Is it all hype or is there something in it?
I think there's definitely a certain amount of doom and gloom, but I think it's regionalised. I think some high streets we see are really thriving. They really reflect the prosperity and what's going on in those towns and spaces. But others where there's perhaps been industrial decline or an even greater shift in consumer behaviours, they're having a really difficult time. We saw recently, I think there was 7,500 net closures of high street stores last year, and that was up about 30% the year before, particularly around fashion and non-food. So, for the people that work there and for the customers that have enjoyed those stores, it can certainly seem pretty tough and grim, but I think there are some bright prospects as well in certain areas.
Sure. And what is sort of causing the shops to close? Is it all online or is there something else going on?
Online's certainly a big factor. Online is now growing. At Christmas, it was almost a fifth of all retail purchases. So there's definitely a big shift to online. And therefore, that is obviously going to impact the economics of people that run a physical store. But we're also seeing that digital retail still happens. 80% of retail still happens in physical stores, and people are still going there and spending their money. So I think online is definitely something that is going to continue to grow, particularly with 5G and better handsets and a better experience for customers. But I think where retailers do it well in a physical world, there's still a real demand from customers to go shopping and to have a great experience.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because you hear so much about online, and to hear that actually 80% it's all still done in store.
I think that's really the key point. I mean, most of our shopping is still done on the high street.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt that there is a place for the high street. The challenge is whether the high street experience is sufficient to protect the share that it has at the moment. And the experience that you get online and in store are very, very different. There are some great things about an online experience, which if you could replicate elements in a store, would fundamentally transform the way you thought about the store experience. There's probably some things in store which are really, really important. The ability to pick up what you're buying, to look at it, to be around with other people while you're doing it, which is much, much harder to replicate online. The challenge, I think, for us to answer the questions that are out there at the moment is, how do we create those new experiences? How do we make the high street experience more exciting, more interesting and more valuable than it is today, but not be frightened by online? Brands are on both. One of the challenges with online, of course, is that you can disappear into the ether with so much pressure on price. So we've heard a lot from online brands recently, and I'm sure, Colin, you've had the same experience, where online brands talk to us about, I need to feel that I can get close to the high street so I can amplify my brand to people, let people experience my brand in a way that they can't online. But that's very expensive. It's a really complex and expensive process to open a store on the high street.
And we're starting to see big companies like Amazon recognising, as Matt's saying, that they've got to open a physical presence in order to be closer to where the customers are.
Well, it's the reverse, isn't it? It's sort of online first and then in the high street.
For sure, and even with my experience as a millennial, I've only just started using ASOS, which makes me feel like just really behind the curve, because I really valued the in-store experience. But now that I've started using ASOS, I can see how it's addictive, how it's appealing, because it's just got such a great user interface. They make returns really easy, which is the biggest, I think, barrier to entry that I felt using online for clothes shopping, that if it's not going to fit me, it's going to be a faff to get to the post office. But they make it so easy that now I see how you can get ASOS addiction. So if you see me in like ASOS Anonymous, like for a meeting to deal with that subsequent addiction, you'll know why, because of the great user interface. But in terms of, more generally, how are retailers dealing with that shift of millennials from, assets and possessions to kind of experiences and rental? So you have things like Uber instead of actually buying a car, and I guess it translates into the high street. How are you seeing that translate into retail?
Yeah, I've got 2 young children. Cameron's just about to be 17, Grace is 13, and they spend more and more they are recycling their purchases. So I see a trend where they want the expensive brands, but they're perhaps prepared to buy online through Depop or eBay and places like that, wear it for a bit, get the Instagram shot, and then they sell it again. And our house is, basically a recycling centre for fashion. So I think that we're seeing a lot of development around repurchase, and maybe people preparing to spend a bit more for certain pieces or certain footwear, but with the thought in mind that once they've had their use out of it, there is still a residual value, a bit like the way people think about cars. You buy a car and there's a confirmed price when you hand it back in a period of time. So I hope that we'll see more.
That's really encouraging, isn't
product.
it? I mean, you hear so much about waste, and we'll probably get onto that in a bit. But the fact that actually items are reused, resold, bought on, it's very encouraging.
And successful businesses recognise, what consumers need and what consumers are doing and how they're behaving, and respond to that. And they respond to that really, fast and with solutions that they will then gravitate to. ASOS is a great example of, a great experience. But one of the big challenges, which you touched on, was returns. So if you're an online business, it's very expensive. My girlfriend is regularly buying loads of different colours and sizes of the same thing.
Yeah,
and I said, why have you bought all those? It doesn't matter, I just send them back.
Exactly.
And it's free.
But that's a real cost. It's a drain on the economy, it's a drain on the environment and all these things. There's a really interesting case, and I know you've spent some time out in China recently, Colin, but there's been a couple of examples we've seen over there where people who don't return goods when they're bought online actually build up loyalty rewards as a result of not doing that, and it becomes a real positive benefit, and you can get discounts, you can get access to other things because you're a good customer in the terms of an online experience. Now at the moment we are frightened, I think, in the UK to go down that route in case we alienate the shopping behaviour that you're describing. And at some point, it's going to become unsustainable on cost, because one of the things that people perceive about online, of course, that it is cheaper, and you'll always get the best deal online. And if you're looking for fast fashion, or if you're looking for things to turn around, then getting something early at a discount means you might just get your money back or even make a premium on those further down the line. So it's a really interesting conundrum, I think, for retailers. And we in the UK have been, I think, relatively slow to adapt to the ways in which we could respond to those trends. But that's part of what Colin and I do within our business, which is to identify those, to help retailers understand what they might do about them, and then put some of those ideas into action and see what works and what doesn't work for them.
And when you talk about consumers wanting more of an experience, our latest consumer tracker report showed that confidence is down. Is it because of that, or is there something else going on as well? What else is impacting?
I think there's a hypothesis that confidence, particularly with the political situation at the moment and the uncertainty, that's certainly impacting confidence. But it was interesting to see yet again in March, retail sales were up. So consumers are still spending, and they're putting that a lot of that going on additional consumer debt as well. So in some ways, consumers' wages are rising. We've got record employment. So all the kind of structural things for having a buoyant economy, consumer economy, are there. But this is, I think, being tempered. We're seeing that the spending discretionary items, such as maybe a big TV or a luxury item, is definitely down, with people focusing more on food and essentials.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
And Colin, I know you've got the numbers because we've seen this before, but I think part of the confidence knock is the fact that when brands have gone under, they've been the really big brands.
Yeah.
So they've been really well-known high street names. And yet, I think, certainly looking at the high street around where I am, the smaller brands appear to be doing pretty well.
Yep.
There are smaller businesses which are arriving. There always seems to be a new business appearing, and it could be sort of one or two shops, not 150, 200, 300 shops.
I see online as a big opportunity for the high street as well. I occasionally like to buy, treat myself to a nice pair of brogues. So I went online, found this little company, Anderson's, up in Durham. Now, previously, the only customers they had were the people that walked past in the high street in Durham. But through good search engine optimization, I found them. I bought my brogues, they arrived the next day. And in the box was a personal note from the owner saying thank you for starting to shop with them, and a free pair of socks. And that
Nice.
really, as a shallow Scotsman, that's about my loyalty.
Free socks,
Yes, yeah, you had me at free pair of
And
socks.
I can see online as a great opportunity for some of these small companies as well to reach a much bigger audience.
Sure.
And it takes you down the long tail, I think, as well for customers. So where before you would have only been aware of the big names, the ones that you see easily, now you're kind of being pushed a bit further down, exploring, discovering new brands. There's the desire to have something new that no one else at the party is wearing, and you tend to find those niche pieces at those smaller stores which have only one or two branches. So I think that's an advantage.
I agree, and I think people want to support small businesses.
Sure.
I think the more you can personalise your business and build a relationship. Look at Finisterre, based in the southwest where I live, and they're investing a lot in sustainability and recycled materials. And they really tell their story well. They started online, but they've started to open up in the high street as well, so that people can touch and feel and have a discussion about their ethos and the materials that they are recycling to make these great outdoor products.
And I think that's a great example in so many ways. I mean, digital and online retailing isn't just about the convenience of getting something to your door. Introducing the socks, you've got an extra physical experience of opening that, and a surprise which you wouldn't expect to get in a store. Like you, I live in a small town in Yorkshire, and a number of the shops, I wonder how on earth they can possibly survive and have a presence on the market square. But it's because they're selling successfully online. So they've got this opportunity to learn from customers who come into the store. They can talk to people. They can see what's happening in front of them in the physical world, but they can actually extend their reach in the digital world, which means they're still profitable and they can succeed and they can continue to grow. And more and more the work that we're doing is looking at how can you blend the best of both? How can you give smaller businesses a way out to a wider audience where it doesn't have to be exclusive? It doesn't have to be one or the other, but learning the lessons from both and making the experience that you provide, whether it's going the extra mile, the free pair of socks, or just something a little bit sort of different or a bit cool, which is you've just been describing, Dara, around getting clothes that someone else won't have seen in the same shop as you the day before or the day after.
Yeah. And actually, given that we're starting to kind of look to the future, what, for the both of you, does the future of the high street look like?
I think the high street will be very different. I think we can see in the high street some challenges for the traditional department store format in some locations, although they continue to thrive. You only need to look at Selfridges and the success of that business, where they've used the space to innovate and to curate and to, to create an amazing place to come and experience new brands and new services. But I think more and more the high street is going to reflect the local communities. And I think maybe in some instances, the department store might morph into the farm shop. And, we're starting to see people wanting to support local farmers. They go there, and it's very much started off around core fruit, vegetable and fresh produce, but they're now starting to add on clothing and homewares and local companies that they become a destination, and it's part of a recreational activity where you go to buy, but also to enjoy. So, and
to support your community as well. I suppose it's all part. It's intertwined.
Exactly. I think people feel that they're putting their it's the local pound into the local pocket of people that they want to support. And I think there's definitely some big opportunities there. But in other areas, if they've been hard hit by maybe closure of plants or work moving, it is going to be really tough. And I think some of the high streets will struggle to remain relevant to the local community.
Yeah.
I also think there's a challenge around supply and demand. As more shops close, that's going to force a reset in pricing for some of these locations, because maybe some shops are closing because they can't afford the rent and the tax, and that will have to adjust if the owners of those properties want to make money out of them.
That's sad, isn't it? I mean, I guess you've got the issue of stores, you've got towns where stores are closing. There's more demand for housing. You need some probably quite good town planning to sort of reinvent, but perhaps the funds aren't there to do that. And is that accurate? Is that something we're seeing?
I think there's also an ecosystem as well. You hear about, maybe the bank closes, and then if the bank closes and the pub closes and the post office closes, I think, there's certain things that you need to support a community. I was reading yesterday about the co-op, where sometimes if they have to refurbish a store, they go in with a pop-up store because they realise that community can't survive without their co-op for daily needs. So I think when you start to lose one or two of the key elements of what makes up a high street, it can really have a negative downward spiral on each of the other services as well.
Interesting.
Two things in there, I think, which personally I think are really, really interesting and are going to really shape the way in which things do change. So one is the provenance, the idea of where have these items come from? And there's a lot of brands that talk about the provenance. You only have to go to some of the upper market supermarkets and they'll tell you which farm the food came from, etc. And that's important because you feel a connection then with what you're buying as opposed to just a homogenous product. But then it's about destination, and that's a great word, Colin. You talk about shopping becoming a destination. I'm really interested in the role that technology will have to play in the future experiences that High Street provides to its customers. And cash is a great example. Will we be completely contactless in a couple of years? And if we are, what will that mean for the people who currently depend on cash? If you go into a store in 5 years' time, what's it going to look like? Is it going to be somewhere that you go just to buy a particular item? Or is it going to be because you enjoy being in that store? And you go there with friends, you go there to meet, you go to do other things. We don't know. But technology can change the way an environment feels. We carry around in our pockets an iPhone, a Galaxy, whatever we happen to use ourselves. And every bit of our lives has been made easier by technology, whether it's Snapchat, WeChat, Instagram, Facebook. We connect in so many different ways. In a shop, the technology that we've got at the moment really just allows us to pay. It doesn't navigate us around the experience. It doesn't embed us in what's happening or allow us to share that experience with people. It doesn't make it easier. It's the same format, just with a few add-ons. You start to think about where technology might play a leading role in those experiences. And part of that, for me, again, comes back to data. Online, we know everything about you. Everything you pick up, put down, the colours, the sizes, etc., etc. In a store, you're just one of a single-digit footfall that comes through the place. The moment you start to join those things up, we can get into something which is much, much more individual, much, much more tailored, and feels like you're really doing something with the brand and the brand is doing something with you, as opposed to the transactions that we have today.
So how will that manifest itself? How will that feel? What's an example of how that will all work?
Well, I was out in China last week, and there's a company called Hema, which is a new format supermarket that's been developed by Alibaba, and it's basically an online fulfillment depot with a shop beneath it. in a neighbourhood that's high density with target customers. And to Matt's point, you can't shop in that store without having your mobile phone with you to pay and to navigate. Wow. And in China, if you have a mobile phone, it's directly related to you, so it's your personal identifier. And Hema in China now, 90% of those stores are offering 30-minute fulfillment to the neighbourhood around them. So you can either shop with them online, or if you go in, you have to take your mobile phone to identify yourself, to pay and to get the additional services. And I think we'll see a real dramatic change around that in the next couple of years. If you go into Sainsbury's, just opened a predominantly mobile-only till-less store this week in Holborn Circus, and it's definitely the direction of travel, and I think it can take a lot of friction out of retail as well. If you think of the friction of having to put something in a basket and then take it out and then scan it again and then put it back in a basket versus you scan, you put it in your bag and you're done. I think it's a really nice proposition for
as long as people don't get too used to doing that and they go to a
normal store and then they walk out.
Yes, there's definitely
shoplifting's going to go up, isn't it?
Theft and loss issues.
I can really relate to like what you were saying about China as well, because I was just in China last summer, and like as always, I take out a lot of currency when I go to a country, just because I think it's always good to have cash on you, and I like the feel of it as well. And like whenever I was going to pay for something, my friends who are Chinese and all have WeChat and WePay would just sort of laugh at me and like shake their head indulgently, being like, "Oh, Dara, put away your old-fashioned money here. We don't use paper money." And I think it's really interesting because I think, you know, in the West, in Sweden, and in the UK, we think we're really advanced in our cashless journey, but I think China's nearing the end of it. So that's quite an interesting kind of development. And given that we're seeing the rise of, you know, checkout-free stores, smartphones being used to pay, do we think that we'll see the disappearance of cash from the high street soon?
I think we'll see the disappearance. I hope we see the different disappearance of checkouts in places that it's appropriate to remove that. So it's certainly my point of view is the cost and the space. You know, the cost of all those tills and the space that those tills sit on and the people that staff those tills is a big additional cost that we all pay in all the products that we buy.
Oh, yeah.
And the more that retailers can free up that space to either sell product or provide other services, and the more that they take the humans out of that activity but make it easier for customers. I think the self-scan is not a particularly nice experience, and you're still having to overcome the age verification and some friction like
and
that.
And the bagging lady shouting.
And the bagging lady shouting.
Have you put this in the bag? Have you put this in the bag? Yes, I have. I brought my own bag there.
But scanning it on your phone and putting it in your bag that's over your shoulder and walking out, I think is a really nice proposition. However, if I was buying, say I was buying a briefcase, you know, that I'd taken a lot of time to consider, or a really nice jacket, I think I would still want the interaction and maybe the eye-to-eye contact and the reassurance as the shop assistant folds it and wraps it nicely for you.
Yes,
so I think different missions probably need different technology solutions.
Yeah, and the experience is very different. I mean, going to get your grocery shopping, I think for most people is a chore that you have to do, and whether it's sitting online and inputting it, you know, line by line, or going around the shop and doing your bagging issues and so on. Whereas buying, you know, some clothing or, you know, a slightly more high value item, you expect the experience to feel different. I mean, I'd love to go to a supermarket and simply scan in my shopping list, walk to the end and have it in a basket, in a trolley that I can walk out the store. And, you know, the Hema example is a brilliant example of where technology's moved on. At Market Gravity, we look at precedents elsewhere in the world and use those to inspire us in the ways we can think differently. One thing that interests me around online in the UK at the moment and elsewhere is when you go online, you still have a checkout and a basket. You're reflecting exactly the same things, which annoy us when we go into a store. You know, but it's the experience. And again, you know, we've all talked there about how it feels when you go through that process. And it's up to us really to look at how can we alter that experience? How can we change the way it feels to be in a store, no matter what it is that you're buying?
So you were mentioning the ways in which technology is enhancing the experience for consumers. So what other innovative, futuristic, sort of, I can't believe this is real technologies have you seen in retail, especially given with the stuff that you're doing up in Leeds with the walk?
Yeah, so the walk in Leeds is a really, really exciting venture for us. We're looking at bringing a load of retail tech businesses together into a space where they can begin to collaborate around trends, around changes in behaviour and society, and come up with interesting solutions, which are, some of those will be technology solving known problems or bringing us up to speed with some other areas of the world. And some of it is literally just experimenting with what is the art of the possible with the technology that we've got. So I've been working with a couple of 1980s pop stars around the possibility of using 3D audio implementation to change how a space feels.
I have to know who these 1980s pop
That's
stars
exactly what I
are.
was thinking. I was like, you've got to drop some names.
It's an amazing company. It's called Illustrious. It's founded, it's Martin Ware, who was Heaven 17 and The Human League, and his colleague Vince Clarke, who was Erasure and Yazoo.
Yes.
So, I mean, these guys understand sound and how it works. And they've done big scale external implementations. They've done audio things on Millennium Bridge and other places. And what they've created is using technology and speakers is to fundamentally transform the way a space feels through the use of sound, and they will compose sound to fit an environment. Wow. So technology isn't just about the mobile app, it isn't just about the frictionless payments, it's also about how do you feel in that space. And some of the other companies that we've got in there, there's a company called SignSticks that has come in, and they use digital content, and they can move that content around dependent on who's in front of it, who's there and what they're doing. And more as we sort of try to learn from what's happening out there, and we look at the big trends in society and the things that are really important, like the environment, etc., we need to be able to think a little bit more than just the piece of technology that makes a single thing easier, and respond to what people really care about. And I know, Colin, certainly one of the big retailers that we had in recently referenced the retail trends review that you did with us in Leeds in January, and that's what sparked the interest in coming to see us in the walk and giving them access to the companies that we're working with. So people do really care.
Yeah, and I think your point about people are really trying to reimagine retail, and not just the physical and digital world, but also the product proposition and the sustainability of those spaces and the products that they sell. And I think sustainability, particularly, we've seen in the news how important that is. And I think retail and consumer goods companies have got a really important role to play in that and responding to the consumer needs. And I think you spoke earlier or previously to the team at Clean Kilo who've opened up the shop with no packaging, and we're seeing retailers in the Netherlands who are opening up whole supermarkets without any plastic. So I think really trying to respond. But I think also what's going to happen is people are educated. We were talking earlier about ASOS and how it's great to return a product if you're not happy with it. But I think when you start to educate people about, well, that has a carbon impact, the vehicle that then takes that back and the cardboard that's then put in the bin. And I think more and more, the more information that we share with consumers and retailers share with consumers that helps them inform, the more people are going to drive sustainable purchase. Yep. And I think retailers, one of our big trends was the retailers that don't respond to that are really going to be punished by the consumer, because I think previously it was make it, sell it, forget about it. And I think, retailers in particular really have to be thinking about the closed cycle and how do you get back to I remember when I was young, you'd buy a bottle of Iron Brew and take it back, and you'd get the refund in your bottle, and that would get, and I think you can definitely see that coming back.
Just milk bottles as well.
Yeah, milk bottles, exactly.
It's that Dara, it's that educated choice I think is really important. So, and technology allows us, this doesn't have to be a marketing campaign about we're going to be, clean, we're going to get our environmental impact down, etc. This, technology allows you now to allow people to understand the choices they're making while they're in the store. So you can have two products next to each other, and you say, if you buy this one, this is the impact you're going to have. If you buy that one, that's the impact you're going to have. Shelf edge technology and some of the other things that are coming through, which are now, not necessarily yet in the UK, but they are mainstream. They're proven technologies that can work. It's how do you build that proposition experience around it that educates people to make choices, so that when people are looking for a place that they can go where they can make the right decision, you can help signpost that and help them to do that consistently. So they don't, as I would probably do through laziness, just say, well, I don't know which one's different here, but I'll just take that one because it's the one I always buy. And that, again, starts to get you into that cycle of the shopping destination being very different, because you're understanding the item that you're buying, whether it's the provenance, whether it's the touch and feel, or whether it's knowing the impact of buying one thing versus another. And again, that's, tech can support that. It's not tech for tech's sake, it's tech to allow people to make the choices that they really want to make, I think.
Can I pick up on one of the things you mentioned earlier, Matt, which I think you talked about digital content, is that right? So
yes.
sounds quite sort of Minority Report, where you're walking up and a screen appears with a picture of something you'd look at. Is that what you're talking about here, where it will recognise your phone and put up pictures which
there's lots of different ways. I
corresponds?
mean, let's be honest. I mean, in the UK, we don't live behind our phones in the same way that the Chinese and so on do. So we need to find where is the acceptable line for people for the use of data. One of the companies that we've got in the walk-in leads is a company called Zenz, and they do wireless charging. Now, if you put your phone down to wireless charge, that can take the data from your phone. It can know if you're flying, for example, if you're flying out on a BA flight out of Heathrow, it will know where you're going, it'll know how often you fly, and it can then tailor content relevant to you around that. Now, for some people, that would be great. Don't bother me with messages as I'm getting on the plane saying, welcome to T5. Actually give me something useful whilst I'm sitting in the lounge trying to kill time before my flight. For other people, it would be immensely freaky to think that it's talking to you.
Yeah.
And we need to work out sort of where that line is. In terms of digital content, there's the easy stuff which helps you to navigate to the things that you want, which we can use in store. Or there is, facial recognition is a starting point. At the moment when you go into a store, the store really knows you when you leave it, because that's when they get the credit card. That's when they can tie it back to someone who's had a previous experience. If you used facial recognition as part of a membership or as part of joining a brand's experience, they then know you when you walk into the store. And the difference then is, knowing that you're in the store, they can give you information which is relevant. So digital signage, it might be screens which know that you're in and are directly for you or for people in the same sort of group of behaviours as you, or it might just be little pointers around the screen. If you go into, I don't know, if you're using your Tesco card or your Sainsbury's Nectar card, and the store knows that you've got 1,000 points and therefore you can have this item for free, it could be offered up to you. Because you've got these points, you can have that. Now, at the moment, would that freak you out? Would that scare you? It wouldn't bother me. I'd find that would actually
If telling me I
quite
could have
easy.
something for free, that would make me quite happy. that wouldn't freak me out.
Depends what it is.
Yeah.
And these are the sorts of trials we need to run. So, Minority Report, actually, I think is kind of like, we could show you stuff which is 10 times more advanced than that,
Sure.
right now. But it's making sure that it feels powerful for you.
Yeah.
Technology has to provide an experience that you enjoy. It has to make life easier, and it has to give you something that you want.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's just there for its own sake.
I think it's a good point. We talk a lot about the creepy line for personalisation, and where's the creepy line, and the challenge is that it's different for each of us.
The technical term, creepy line.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think what we'll maybe see more, previously or up till now, we either opt in or we opt out. So it's kind of binary. We're either happy that you know us and engage with us, or we're not. And I wonder if in the future we're going to be able to tailor it more to specific situations. So as Matt says, you might walk into a store where you do want to be recognised and receive extra services, but there might be other stores where you don't. And then most likely you'll maybe use your personal device to adapt those preferences before you visit.
I guess it depends on the relationships you have with the brand. So the brands that you feel really comfortable with, you're happy to give, this information with this kind of data to, and especially now when we're all becoming a little bit more educated and aware as to how our data is controlled, who owns it, how it's used. I think this is probably going to be a question that more and more people are thinking about.
It's a really good point about the trust and who we trust with our data, and you can see in the news the different lines that certain companies are taking and how the stock market's responding to
For sure.
those that are being better protective of the data.
And as a proposition design consultancy, building propositions for people and for businesses, trust's at the heart of every single one of those. And it's not just trust in the brand to do the right thing with data it might have. It's trusting that the experience is going to work. So I remember, and it feels like years ago now, when you could first get your boarding pass on your mobile phone. And for at least 3 visits to the airport, I printed it off on paper, because there's no way I believed it was going to work.
Exactly.
I just did not trust it was going to be okay. The idea that I could just put my phone on the thing and walk through, I just couldn't believe that at all. But after 3 goes and it worked, and I was then feeling a bit silly that I'd taken the paper copy. And so I built up the trust that I was okay to use that. And then when they start to offer me new opportunities or new information, I'll happily accept that and learn through it. So crossing that line, I think if you cross the line in one go, it's going to be a really hard ask.
There's a great example from Waitrose as well. The John Lewis Partnership is a very trusted brand, and Waitrose have started a new service where their online delivery can be brought to your house while you're not home, and the driver can let themselves in to deliver your groceries. So there's a trust in a brand who're providing a really convenient experience. to people that trust the driver. That's the face of that business, and they trust the driver, and the driver lets themselves in.
Yeah.
Hugely convenient.
I'm not
for
ready
the
for that.
customer.
So, I mean, with increasing threat and opportunity, brands have to look beyond what they call businesses. They have to look at adjacent markets. They have to look at different ways to meet customers in different places. And sometimes that can mean curating services and propositions and experiences which include other brands. We need to look at things in a very, very different way going forward, I think.
And I think I agree, and I think what we're going to see is an interesting emergence of aggregators, companies that take products from various brands but then deliver them conveniently for a consumer. We've been doing trials in Sweden actually, where consumers are now getting their groceries and can get an aggregated delivery to the back of their Volvo, and the delivery driver has a key for a once open of your Volvo boot or trunk if you're American, and you get your deliveries delivered to your car wherever that is just before you go home. So I think it's going to be really interesting, some of the companies that start taking products from many and then deliver a really convenient, consolidated online delivery to your house.
They have to think about how that would work for ice cream though, because that may just melt.
Yeah, you might have to eat that really quickly when you go in the car.
So like after work, it's an excuse to just stuff ice cream really quickly. One thing that I was thinking about was the role of influencers in social media. Like again, I feel very sort of cliched talking about social media and Instagram, even though I'm not actually on Instagram. I know, like sacrilege. But given that typically they've driven a lot of online traffic and online purchases, what's really interesting is that they're now starting to assert themselves offline and actually in real life, IRL. So you have people like Mrs. Hinch, who's just written a book called Hinch Yourself Happy, and she's a cleaning influencer. And recently, all the products that she's been marketing, like mops and blue cloths, have been selling out in store.
Wow.
And obviously she's been doing press releases and book launches and book signings. So again, she's forcing people out again from behind a screen into the stores. So what do you think about the role of social media and influencers in rejuvenating the high street and bringing people back into the real world?
Huge role. I mean, if you look at Kylie Jenner, and she's just become the first billionaire. I think she's 22 or 23.
She's 22.
22, and she's got a staff.
I've missed my calling, haven't I?
But she's got a staff of about 8 or 9 people, and she's really grown that whole empire and that whole brand through social influence. I think that's really exciting. I think what we will see this year is Instagram starting to trial buy from the Instagram page. I'm a big fan of Instagram. It makes me happy as opposed to other social media sites that make me sad. And there's still a wee bit of friction. So when you see something inspiring on Instagram, you sometimes still have to click away or to go to the store to get it. And I think we're going to see more and more of people's payment details linked to their Instagram account. And when you see something you're inspired, you just like it. There may be a stage where it's not just like, but like and have it. And and then there's companies need to look at the fulfillment solutions for that. But I think it's again a great opportunity for small companies who've got limited marketing budgets that have an authentic and exciting social presence to start a business. And in the US, we're starting to see retail malls where they've got excess space because some of the traditional retailers have gone out of business, opening up pop-ups for social and online startups who are wanting to dip their toe for a few months or so into the physical world to learn a bit more. So I think it's going to be a really exciting period over the next year or two as that comes stronger.
I think there's an app called Squarespace that's just launched, which allows people to do flash pop-ups, like literally get tiny retail spaces and just just have a flash sort of sale or example or exhibition of their products. I guess something like
we've been exploring that in Leeds, so we've been talking to the owners of the Trinity Shopping Centre to see if where there are unused spaces, could we take those over for short periods of time to give people a learning in the real world on the high street. But back to the point on social media, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a danger that we underestimate the power. We used to talk about the real world and then the digital world. Actually, it is the real world now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was slightly freaked out, but also slightly pleased to see a headline on BBC this morning, which was, "Do we only go on holiday to take Instagram pictures?"
Oh, let's hope not.
Now that's really, really weird for someone of my generation. But actually, what that's saying is there isn't a difference anymore. So why should I treat social media any differently to anything else I access through my device? If I want to buy what I see in social media, I should be able to do that in the same way as I can on a website for a store. And waking up to this and realizing then who are the people that are really important to us, who can help to drive those products and the product placement out, is going to be a massive threat and opportunity, but something we are very much keen to be a part of understanding. And the right way in which to do that. We talked, it used to be product placement in movies. I think it's a bit more overt than that now. It's people that you've built a trust with through your online connections and through the sites that you use who say, hey, this is good. And so you'll take their word for it and you'll go and buy it.
There's a couple of really interesting trends. You were saying earlier about, will we see more recycling? We're seeing companies now who will rent you high-end brands so that you can gram them. And then once you've taken your photos, give them straight back. And also what we're seeing is...
Like an Aston Martin.
Yeah, exactly.
For the weekend.
Why not?
You might even be able to borrow George Clooney for a weekend if you...
Excellent, even better. And in an Aston Martin.
You can do it with private jets now as well. Just have
I'll get one of them.
quick sessions.
How
on
do we
a
do
private
this?
jet.
But also what we're seeing is companies really bigging up their brands and their logos so that they are easier to see when the Instagram photo's taken, so that the Instagrammer can show off the fact that they've got the latest Burberry jacket or the Balenciaga shoes or whatever.
Oh my Lord.
It sounds incredibly positive. It sounds exciting. It's a brave new world. And, we sort of started off talking about the doom and gloom in the high street. I suppose now is an opportune time to put all this together and to ask our big question. Does the high street have a future?
Absolutely. The future of the high street, I think, is just as strong as it's ever been. It's just adapting to and responding to the changing needs, behaviours, ideals, and ways of living life that people have. But people have to. This is a period of revolution. If you don't do, you're going to fail. If you don't change, if you don't find new ways of operating, then you will join the scrap heap. And I think the brands that have left the high street have been because they haven't done that. There are a lot of brands on the high street that have been very, very successful. Greggs, for example, I think went over $1 billion in profit last year.
Vegan sausage rolls.
Vegan sausage rolls, exactly. But they're not saying, hey, let's leave the high street. What they're saying is, we're here to stay, we're a part of it. What can we do for people on the high street? How can we play to social conscience? How can we play to the things that are important? And they're making a huge success of it. And there will be lots of other brands that will do that. They've just got to know their customers better. They've got to know how to engage with them. And back to what we've been talking about, I think there's a theme through this. They have to change the experience that people have when they go to the destination that is the shop, not simply the transaction that is a unit or a box or a place within a high street or a shopping centre.
My view is yes and no. I think for certain high streets, the future doesn't look bright, and for the people that work in the stores on those high streets who will lose their jobs, as I think there will be a continuing trend as online grows for certain areas to shut more shops and for more people to lose employment in retail, and I think that's got quite a bit to go. But like Matt, I think there are high streets that are responding and that do reflect the local population and respond to that. And the people who own the physical space and the retailers that go in and tailor their offer to the local community, I think it's going to. Always says we're a nation of shopkeepers, but we're also a nation of shoppers. And I think where the high streets get it right, the retailers respond, and they use technology to make it and humans to make a really great experience. I'm really positive about the high streets and the companies that do that.
That's a great note to end on, actually. We've done lots of digital innovation in lots and lots of different companies. And what the implementation of digital solutions, technology solutions does is it changes the role of the human. It doesn't always remove it completely, it just changes it. Because your knowledge about the thing that you're talking about, or the entry point into the experience is different, and humans have to play a different role, and that's just as big an adaptive learning for us as anything else.
Fascinating. Colin, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
I'm looking forward to getting out onto the high street and taking my mobile phone with me.
I'm going to get back on ASOS.
Absolutely.
Come and see us in the walk. Come and see some of the things that we're doing. Come and meet some of the companies we're working around, because it's very hard to describe the potential power of some of the stuff that is already out there.
Yes.
And harnessing it in the right way is going to be tremendously exciting over the next weeks and months.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Green Room by Deloitte. Next time, tune in as we ask our next big question. This podcast is produced by our very own Pod Squad and hosted by George Parrott, Lizzie Elston, Ethan Worth, and Dara Latinwo. Thanks to our creative studio for their technical support. Original music by Ali Barrett from our consulting team.